The night the slave man saved the mistress, and the plantation never felt the same again. The plantation slept the way old houses do, never fully, always listening. Cypress trees stood like watchmen along the dirt road, their branches stirring with the sound of insects and distant water. The big house rose at the center, white columns pale beneath a moon that gave just enough light to show what everyone already knew. Order lived here, and fear lived just beneath it. Isaac knew the sounds of the night better than anyone. He had learned them since boyhood, first as warnings and later as companions. The soft knock of wind against wood meant rain was coming. The sudden hush of frogs meant a stranger was near. Tonight, the air carried something sharper, a unease that clung to his skin as he finished his work in the yard behind the house. He was a tall man, strong without show, his movements measured. Strength on a plantation could be dangerous if noticed too much. Isaac had survived by keeping his eyes lowered and his presence quiet. The overseer trusted him with errands after dark because Isaac never ran, never argued, never did more than what was asked. That trust was a thin shield, but it had kept him alive. Inside the big house, the mistress stood at the window, her fingers pressed lightly against the glass. Eleanor Whitmore had once believed this place would be her refuge. She had arrived years earlier as a bride, carrying trunks filled with dresses and books, believing marriage would give her purpose. The land had taken that belief and buried it beneath routines and expectations she never learned to love. Her husband was away tonight, riding to a neighboring county to settle debts that never seemed to shrink. When he was gone, the house felt larger, its silence louder. Eleanor often found herself wandering the halls after supper, unsure where to place her thoughts. The servants moved carefully around her, respectful but distant, as if afraid her restlessness might spill over onto them. She watched Isaac cross the yard below. He walked with a steady calm that unsettled her. There was something grounding about his presence, something that reminded her the world still functioned beyond her own worries. She had spoken to him only when necessary, brief instructions delivered through habit more than intention. Still, she recognized him as one recognizes a familiar tree, always there, always part of the landscape. That night, a storm threatened but never arrived. Clouds drifted past the moon, throwing shadows across the grounds. Isaac paused near the smokehouse, sensing movement where none should be. He told himself it was nothing, yet the feeling stayed. From the far edge of the property came a sound that didn't belong, a muffled cry, quickly swallowed by the dark. Isaac froze. The rules of survival were clear. Do not investigate. Do not insert yourself into trouble that wasn't assigned to you. Trouble on a plantation rarely ended without blood, and it was never the master's. But the sound came again, closer this time, and something in it cut through Isaac's caution. It wasn't anger or command. It was fear. He moved before he had time to think, slipping between shadows, every step practiced. The quarters were quiet, the people there long since asleep. Near the path leading toward the woods, he saw a figure stumble, pale fabric catching on low branches. Eleanor fell to her knees, breath coming in short gasps. Her shoes were gone, her hair loose, her dress torn at the hem. She hadn't meant to run so far. She hadn't meant to run at all. But when she had overheard raised voices earlier, men arguing in the study she thought empty, something inside her had known to flee. She heard footsteps and turned, terror flooding her face. For a moment, Isaac saw her not as mistress or woman of the house, but as someone cornered by a world suddenly too large. "It's me," he said softly, the words instinctive. She blinked, recognition dawning. "Isaac?" Her voice shook. She tried to stand and failed. He looked around, listening. The night pressed in, expectant. "We can't stay here," he said. He didn't explain. He didn't need to. Helping her up was a line he had never crossed before. His hand hovered, then steadied her elbow. She was lighter than he expected, trembling beneath his grip. They moved toward the trees, away from the open yard. Eleanor's heart pounded so loudly she was certain it could be heard from the house. She wanted to ask questions, why he was here, why he was helping, but something in his silence told her this was not the time. They reached a stand of trees near the creek where the ground dipped and shadows gathered thick. Isaac guided her behind a fallen log just as voices drifted through the air. Men approached with lanterns, their laughter rough, careless. Eleanor's breath caught. She pressed a hand to her mouth as Isaac crouched beside her, still as stone. The lantern light passed close enough for her to see boots and mud, the flicker of flame against bark. The men spoke of nothing important, cards, drink, the road ahead, but Eleanor heard something else beneath their words. Intent. Whatever business they had intended earlier, it had not ended with her escape. When the voices faded, she sagged against the log, shaking. Isaac waited longer than necessary before moving. Only when the night settled back into its uneasy rhythm did he speak again. "They'll be gone soon," he said. "But you can't go back yet." Eleanor looked at him, really looked at him, and for the first time understood how much she did not know about the people who lived and worked around her. "What do you think they wanted?" she asked. He hesitated. Honesty could be dangerous, but lies felt heavier somehow. "I don't know," he said carefully, "but they shouldn't have been in the house." She nodded, tears streaking her face. "I heard them talking about papers, about land, about me not needing to know." Isaac felt something twist in his chest. He had heard such talk before, always whispered, always ending with someone losing everything. Sometimes it was property, sometimes it was a life. "You'll need to stay hidden till morning," he said. "I'll bring water. Food, if I can." She stared at him, disbelief mixing with gratitude. "Why are you doing this?" The question lingered between them, heavier than the dark. Isaac didn't have a clean answer. Maybe it was because he had a sister once who had been afraid like this. Maybe it was because fear sounded the same no matter who felt it. Or maybe it was because, just this once, he wanted the night to end differently than it always did. "Because you needed help," he said. Eleanor nodded, accepting it because there was nothing else to hold on to. The creek murmured nearby, steady and indifferent. Above them, the moon slipped free of clouds, casting pale light through the leaves. When Isaac turned to leave, Eleanor reached out, stopping herself just short of touching him. "Isaac," she whispered, "if this costs you." He met her eyes then, his expression unreadable. "Everything costs something here," he said. "Try to rest." He disappeared into the trees, leaving Eleanor alone with her thoughts and the echo of fear. The plantation stood quiet behind them, unaware that its balance had shifted. The night was not over, and when morning came, nothing would be the same. The sky began to pale just before dawn, the dark thinning into a gray that felt neither safe nor dangerous, only uncertain. Eleanor had not slept. She sat with her back against the fallen log, knees drawn close, listening to the creek and the distant sounds of the plantation waking in slow, habitual waves. Somewhere a rooster cried. Somewhere else, a door creaked open. Life continued as if nothing had happened. Isaac returned just as the first birds began to stir. He moved quietly, a tin cup of water and a small bundle wrapped in cloth tucked beneath his arm. Eleanor rose at the sound of his steps, relief softening the tight line of her shoulders. "Drink," he said, handing her the cup. The water was cold and tasted faintly of iron. She drank too quickly and coughed, embarrassed by how fragile she must look. Isaac turned slightly away, giving her a privacy she hadn't realized she needed. "I'll need to get you back before full light," he said. "Questions start when people notice what's missing." She nodded. "My husband, he'll return today." Isaac's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "Then there's not much time." They waited until the sun rose higher, its light filtering through the trees. When the path looked clear, Isaac led the way, choosing routes that skirted open ground. Eleanor followed, lifting her skirt to keep it from catching. Each step felt like crossing an invisible line she would never fully return from. The back entrance to the house stood open. Inside, the kitchen hummed softly with early work. Isaac paused, listening. Satisfied, he motioned her forward. "You'll go in now," he said. "Act like nothing happened." She hesitated. "And you?" "I'll be where I'm supposed to be." The simplicity of that answer struck her. She stepped inside, then turned. "Thank you," she said, the words inadequate, but all she had. Isaac inclined his head and vanished back into the morning. The day unfolded with painful normalcy. Eleanor bathed, changed clothes, and sat for breakfast, her hands steady despite the storm inside her. The servants avoided her eyes more than usual, as if sensing the tension clinging to her. She wondered what they knew, what they guessed, and what they chose never to say aloud. By midday, her husband returned. Thomas Whitmore entered the house with dust on his boots and irritation already sharpening his voice. He spoke of roads and delays, of men who could not be trusted. Eleanor listened, answering when required, her mind replaying the voices she had heard in the study the night before. When he mentioned paperwork, casually, almost dismissively, her pulse quickened. "Some adjustments may need to be made," he said. "Times are changing." She looked at him then, really looked, and saw something she had ignored for years. Calculation, distance, a sense that everything, including her, was part of a ledger he constantly balanced. That afternoon, Isaac was sent to the far fields with the other men. The overseer's eyes lingered on him longer than usual, suspicion flickering there. Isaac kept his gaze lowered, his expression neutral, but the tension sat heavy in his chest. He felt it again near sunset, the sense of something shifting, like ground loosening beneath one's feet. That night, Eleanor waited until the house quieted before leaving her room. She moved carefully, avoiding lantern light, slipping into the hallway that led toward the rear stairs. She did not know exactly why she was going, only that staying still felt unbearable. Outside, the air was warm, the scent of earth rising. She followed the familiar path toward the trees, heart hammering. When she reached the edge of the woods, she stopped, suddenly unsure. "Mistress Whitmore." Isaac's voice came softly from the shadows. He stepped into view, his presence both unexpected and reassuring. "You shouldn't be here," he said. "I know," she replied, "but I needed to understand." "Understand what?" "Why you helped me. What danger I'm in. What danger you're in now." He considered her for a long moment. "Some things don't get safer just because you know them." She swallowed. "Please," he sighed quietly. "I heard talk before. About selling land. About debts. About you signing things you don't read." Her stomach clenched. Thomas would never. He would if he thought it necessary. The words settled heavily between them. Eleanor thought of the men in the house, the papers, the way fear had driven her into the night without a plan. "What happens now?" she asked. Isaac looked toward the dark outline of the plantation. Now people watched more closely. As if summoned by his words, footsteps approached from the direction of the quarters. A lantern bobbed into view. "Who's there?" a voice called. Isaac stepped back, shadows swallowing him. Eleanor stood frozen, pulse roaring in her ears. "It's me," she said when the light reached her. "I was walking." The man frowned, clearly unconvinced, but nodded. "Best head back, ma'am. Night's not safe." "I know," she said softly. When the lantern disappeared, Isaac reemerged. "You can't come out like this again," he said, urgency in his voice. "Not for either of us." She nodded, tears welling. "I didn't mean to put you at risk." "Risk's been here longer than tonight," he said. They stood there, the unspoken weight of what could not be said pressing in. Finally, Eleanor turned back toward the house, every step heavy with knowledge she could not unlearn. From that night on, the plantation felt different. Conversations stopped when Eleanor entered a room. The overseer watched Isaac with narrowed eyes. Thomas grew distant, secretive, spending long hours locked away with papers Eleanor was no longer allowed to see. And beneath it all ran a quiet understanding between two people bound by a night neither could forget. A knowledge that what had begun as an act of survival was pulling them toward something far more dangerous. The days that followed moved with a strained politeness, like a smile held too long. Eleanor felt it in every room she entered. Doors closed more softly, conversations broke apart mid-sentence, and even the air inside the house seemed careful not to breathe too loudly. Whatever Thomas was planning, it had not ended with her return that night. If anything, it had grown sharper. She began noticing small changes. A ledger locked away that once sat open on the desk. Letters burned instead of saved. Men arriving on horseback at odd hours, their hats pulled low, their voices hushed. Each time, Thomas greeted them with a smile that never reached his eyes. At night, Eleanor lay awake listening to the house settle. She replayed the moment in the woods again and again, not because she wished to return to it, but because it had stripped something away. The illusion that her position protected her, the belief that silence equaled safety. She found herself watching Isaac whenever she could, from the upstairs window as he crossed the yard, from the edge of the gallery as he worked near the stables. He did nothing differently, and that frightened her more than if he had. He still moved with the same measured calm, spoke only when spoken to, kept his eyes lowered. Yet now she knew the cost of that restraint. Isaac felt the change too. The overseer began assigning him to tasks that pulled him farther from the house, farther from familiar ground. Long days in the fields under the unfiltered sun, late nights repairing fences no one remembered breaking. It was not punishment yet, but it was pressure, the kind meant to test how much a man could carry before something cracked. One evening, as Isaac returned from the far boundary of the land, he noticed a horse he didn't recognize tied near the barn. Its saddle was worn, practical, belonging to someone who traveled often and did not stay long. Voices drifted from inside, Thomas's, and another, lower and unfamiliar. Isaac slowed, listening. "She won't sign," Thomas said, irritation threading his words. "She asks questions now. Then you answer them," the other man replied. "Or you stop asking for help." There was a pause. Isaac imagined Thomas's hand tightening around a glass, his jaw setting the way it did when challenged. "I'll handle my wife," Thomas said coldly. Something in that sentence lodged deep in Isaac's chest. That night, Eleanor did not wait for restlessness to drive her from bed. She left her room with purpose, wrapping a shawl around her shoulders as if it might shield her from what she already sensed. She moved through the house quietly, down the back stairs, and into the night. Isaac was near the creek, rinsing dirt from his hands. He looked up at her approach, surprise flickering briefly before caution returned. "You shouldn't be here," he said again, the words familiar now. "I know," she replied, "but I don't think I have much time." He studied her face, the tightness around her eyes, the way her hands trembled despite her attempt at composure. "What happened?" "I heard them," she said. "Thomas and another man. They're arranging something. Something that involves my signature. Or my absence." Isaac's breath slowed. "You think he'd hurt you?" "I think," she said carefully, "that he wouldn't stop someone else from doing it." The honesty of it settled between them, heavy and undeniable. "There's more," she continued. "The papers he mentioned before, they concern the land near the river. If he sells it, families will be moved. Split." Isaac closed his eyes briefly. He knew which land she meant. He knew who lived there. "They can't just," he began, then stopped. Of course they could. He had seen it happen before. That night, Eleanor said softly, "You saved me. I don't know how to repay that. But I can't let this happen without trying to stop it." "And what do you think I can do?" Isaac asked, though something in his voice had already shifted. "I don't know," she admitted. "But you hear things. You see things. And you know what it costs when men like Thomas get what they want." Isaac looked toward the dark line of trees, toward the quarters beyond. The rules that had kept him alive pressed in on him now, suffocating in their familiarity. "Don't be seen. Don't be involved. Don't matter. If they suspect me," he began. "They already do," she said gently. The truth of that left no room for argument. Before either could say more, a sharp crack split the night. A gunshot, close enough to echo through Isaac's bones. Birds burst from the trees, their cries ragged. Eleanor gasped, stumbling back. Another shot followed, then shouting. "They've found something," Isaac said, already moving. "Or someone." He hesitated only a moment before turning back to her. "Go." "No. If anyone asks, you never left the house." "What about you?" "I'll do what I can." She wanted to stop him, to say his name again, to make him promise something neither of them could guarantee. But the night was already breaking apart around them. By morning, the plantation buzzed with rumor. A man had been caught near the river road. A runaway, some said. A thief, others whispered. The truth shifted depending on who spoke and who listened. Isaac returned just before dawn, his clothes stained with mud, his face set in a way Eleanor had never seen. Their eyes met across the yard, a silent exchange that carried more than words ever could. Later that day, Thomas announced his intention to leave again, this time for several days. He spoke lightly of business, of opportunities. Eleanor listened, nodding when expected, her mind racing. When he was gone, she moved quickly. She found the ledger hidden behind a false panel in the study. Her hands shook as she opened it, scanning names, dates, amounts. The truth was worse than she feared. Sales arranged without consent. Debts disguised as investments. Her name listed where it did not belong. Footsteps sounded in the hall. She barely had time to hide the book before the door opened. The overseer stood there, his expression unreadable. "Mem," he said, tipping his hat without warmth. "There's talk." "Of what?" she asked, forcing calm into her voice. "Of you being out at night. Of certain slaves getting ideas." Her heart pounded. "And what do you think?" "I think," he said slowly, "that trouble's coming. And it tends to fall hardest on those without protection." When he left, Eleanor sank into the chair, the weight of his warning pressing down on her. She knew then that the line had been crossed, that whatever fragile balance remained was already tipping. Across the yard, Isaac worked in silence, every sense alert. He felt it too, the tightening, the gathering storm. Saving her that night had not ended anything. It had begun something neither of them could turn away from now. The trouble did not arrive all at once. It crept in slowly, like water seeping beneath a door, unnoticed until the floorboards began to warp. Thomas returned sooner than expected. His horse came into the yard just after noon, dust-caked and lathered, its rider tight with impatience. Eleanor watched from the upstairs window as he dismounted, handing the reins off without a word. Something in the way he squared his shoulders told her he already knew things had shifted in his absence. He found her in the sitting room, seated too neatly, hands folded as though at prayer. "You've been busy," he said, not bothering with greeting. She met his eyes. "Have I?" He smiled thinly. "The overseer tells me you've taken an interest in matters that don't concern you." "They concern this house," she replied evenly, "and the people on this land." That earned her a sharper look. "You're being influenced." "By what?" she asked. "Truth." The silence stretched. Thomas stepped closer, lowering his voice. "You're forgetting your place." The words landed with a dull finality. Eleanor felt something inside her settle, not into fear, but into clarity. "No," she said softly. "I'm remembering it." That night, Isaac was called to the barn after supper. The message came from a boy barely old enough to work, his eyes darting as if the shadows themselves might listen. Isaac followed without question. Refusing would have been worse. Inside the barn, the overseer waited, lantern hanging low. Two other men stood nearby, their expressions hard. "You've been walking where you don't belong," the overseer said. Isaac kept his face still. "I go where I'm sent. You talk when you shouldn't." "I don't talk much at all." A hand struck him across the mouth, sudden and sharp. The taste of blood filled his mouth, but he did not react. He had learned long ago that restraint could sometimes save more than resistance. "You think we don't see what's happening?" the overseer continued. "You think we don't know why the mistress looks out the window every time you cross the yard?" Isaac said nothing. Silence was the only shield he had left. "You'll be watched," the man said finally. "Every step. Every breath. And if we decide you're a problem." He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. Isaac was released just before midnight, bruised but upright. He did not go back to the quarters immediately. Instead, he walked the long way around, letting the night cool the heat in his skin. Pain was familiar. What troubled him more was the certainty that the net was tightening. Eleanor felt it too. The house had turned against her in subtle ways. Doors locked where they hadn't before. Keys misplaced. Servants reassigned so that familiar faces were replaced by distant ones. Even her meals changed, simpler, colder, as if comfort itself were being rationed. She moved carefully now, listening more than speaking, watching for patterns. And in those patterns, she saw the shape of an ending she did not want to accept. Late one evening, she found Isaac by the tool shed, his face shadowed, his movements stiff. "They hurt you," she said quietly. "It's nothing," he replied. "It's not nothing." Their eyes met, and for a moment the world narrowed to the space between them, heavy with words they could not safely speak. "They are planning to move people," she said. "Soon, before the sale is finalized." Isaac nodded once. "I know. If I could get the papers," she continued, "the real ones, I could prove." "They won't let you," he said. "And if they think you tried, they'll stop pretending." She drew a breath. "Then we don't pretend anymore either." The idea hung there, dangerous and undeniable. That night, Eleanor returned to the study for the second time. She worked quickly, hands steady despite her racing heart. She found the ledger again, along with letters she had not seen before, names, agreements, promises written in confident ink. Footsteps sounded outside the door. She hid the papers beneath her shawl just as Thomas entered. He took one look at her and smiled, slow and cold. "I wondered how long it would take." Her voice did not shake. "You're ruining this place." "No," he said. "I'm saving it. For yourself. For us," he corrected. "You just don't understand the cost of survival." "I understand it better than you think," she replied. His expression hardened. "You've been spending too much time listening to people who fill your head with nonsense. If by nonsense you mean truth." He struck the desk, the sound sharp in the confined room. "This ends now." Outside, the night pressed close, as if aware of the line being drawn. Isaac felt it then, a wrongness that set his nerves alight. He left the quarters without permission, moving through shadows toward the house. Each step carried risk, but the pull was stronger than fear. He reached the back of the house, just as raised voices spilled through an open window. "You think you can expose me?" Thomas was saying. "You think anyone would choose your word over mine?" "I think," Eleanor replied, her voice steady but fierce, "that I won't be silent." Isaac did not hesitate. He moved to the window, listening, judging the moment. When Thomas's voice rose again, sharp with something close to rage, Isaac acted. He knocked, once, firm and unmistakable. Silence fell. Thomas opened the door, surprise flashing across his face before it twisted into anger. "What do you want?" "There's trouble near the river," Isaac said calmly. "Men fighting. Need your attention." Thomas hesitated, suspicion warring with urgency. Eleanor met Isaac's eyes over Thomas's shoulder, understanding passing between them like a held breath. "Go," she said to her husband. "This can wait." He studied her a moment longer, then turned away, pulling on his coat. "We'll finish this later." The door closed behind him. For a heartbeat, the house stood still. Then Eleanor sagged, the strength draining from her. Isaac caught her before she fell, steadying her just long enough to keep her upright. "You have to hide those papers," he said urgently. "And you have to be ready." "For what?" "For what comes next," he replied. From the yard came the sound of Thomas's horse being led away. The danger had been delayed, not removed. The consequence of that night's courage was already unfolding, thread by thread, tightening toward a moment neither of them could escape. The house felt empty in a way that made Eleanor's chest ache. Thomas was gone, but his presence lingered like a shadow that refused to leave. Every step she took echoed, every creak of floorboard seemed louder than usual. She moved cautiously, clutching the bundle of papers close to her chest, her mind racing with possibilities, dangers, and strategies she could barely name. Isaac waited near the edge of the yard, hidden in the darkness like he had so many nights before. When he saw her step outside, he nodded once, silently, and she joined him without a word. The night was warm, but it carried the scent of rain and distant earth. Each breath Eleanor took was heavy with fear and anticipation. "We don't have much time," Isaac said, keeping his voice low. "They'll be back before dawn, or worse, They'll send someone else. We move now, or not at all. Eleanor nodded, tightening the shawl around the bundle. She did not need to ask if he had a plan. She trusted him because there had been no other option, because trust was born in shared danger, and they had had plenty of that. They moved quickly, slipping through the shadows toward the creek. The water shimmered pale under the moonlight, its surface calm, yet deceptively deep. Eleanor's heart raced with every step, each branch that scratched her dress, each rustle in the underbrush. "Why do you risk so much?" she asked quietly. "For me?" Isaac did not answer immediately. His eyes scanned the perimeter, alert. "It's not just you," he said finally. "It's what's right. What can be saved before it's too late?" They reached the creek, and Eleanor could see a small rowboat tied loosely to a post. She had not known it was there. "How did you?" she began, but Isaac silenced her with a shake of his head. "Questions later," he said. "Get in." She did, carefully, the papers pressed against her chest. Isaac pushed the boat into the water, steadying it as it drifted into the current. The river carried them quietly, the sounds of the plantation fading behind them. Halfway across, a shout pierced the night. Eleanor's stomach dropped. Lanterns appeared on the riverbank, their light flickering like angry fireflies. Men's voices called out, demanding, threatening. Isaac crouched low, rowing with precise, quiet movements. "Keep your head down," he whispered. "They won't stop us, not if we stay silent." The current took them faster than he had hoped. The cries grew fainter as the trees thickened, wrapping the river in shadow. Eleanor finally allowed herself to breathe. "Where are we going?" she asked. "Somewhere no one expects," Isaac replied. "Somewhere they can't follow." She glanced at him, finally seeing the lines in his face that the plantation's hard work had carved. Determination, caution, and a courage that neither privilege nor power could grant. The river widened, and with it came a sense of isolation. Eleanor could feel the weight of the papers against her chest, a symbol of everything at stake: property, lives, justice. She had once thought her life confined to the walls of that house, to the dictates of her husband, to the routines of the plantation. Tonight, she understood that life could be broader, more dangerous, and yet full of possibility. They reached a bend where the current slowed, and Isaac guided the boat into a narrow inlet hidden by overhanging branches. He tied it securely to a gnarled root. "We wait here until morning," he said. "Then we move." Eleanor sank to the bottom of the boat, exhausted in every way. Fear, adrenaline, relief. For a long moment, they sat in silence, listening to the water, to the night, to the rustle of leaves. "I don't know what comes next," she admitted. "But I know this. I couldn't have stayed there another night." Isaac's gaze met hers. No one should be forced to. The distant owl hooted, and the river murmured, indifferent to the struggles of humans. Yet in that quiet, something shifted. Eleanor realized that the choices made tonight, bold, reckless, dangerous, had given her something she had never had before: a sense of agency, fragile, but real. "Do you ever wonder," she said softly, "if the plantation will ever be the same?" Isaac didn't answer at once. When he did, his voice carried the weight of truth. "It won't. And that's not all bad. Things that survive change. Things that change survive." They remained in the boat until the first hints of dawn began to color the sky, pale gold brushing the trees. Every rustle of leaves, every distant sound from the plantation reminded them that danger was not gone, only delayed. But in that moment, suspended between night and day, they allowed themselves to hope. They could not know what awaited them beyond the trees, beyond the papers, beyond the narrow corridor of river that protected them. But they had acted, together, and in doing so had altered the path of lives that had once seemed predetermined. Eleanor finally allowed herself to lean back, letting the tension drain from her body. Isaac, still vigilant, watched the sky, his mind mapping the journey ahead. Both understood the unspoken truth. The night had changed them, and nothing after this would be simple or safe. And yet, in the quiet river bend, they found something rare: a shared resolve, a fragile alliance that felt more powerful than the walls of the house, more enduring than the fear that had long governed their days. The sun rose slowly over the river, turning the water into molten gold. Mist curled along the surface, hiding them in its silvery veil, as if the world itself had granted them a moment of reprieve. Eleanor and Isaac remained in the boat, silent except for the gentle splash of oars and the occasional call of a distant bird. For the first time in days, neither felt the immediate weight of being hunted, and yet the tension lingered, like a shadow stretched across the dawn. Eleanor unwrapped a bundle of papers, smoothing them carefully on her lap. Each letter, each ledger page, bore evidence of deception, betrayal, and intent to exploit. She traced the inked lines with her finger, noting the names, the dates, the promises broken. They were more than documents, they were proof, and in them lay the possibility of justice. "Do you think anyone will believe us?" she asked quietly, her voice almost swallowed by the morning mist. Isaac's eyes met hers, steady and unwavering. "Some will. Others will have no choice but to. But it won't be easy. Things like this, truth, rarely are." Eleanor nodded. She had known the cost of speaking, of acting. Already, the plantation awaited her return, and with it, Thomas's scrutiny, suspicion, and wrath. Yet the night had shown her that inaction carried its own danger, perhaps even a greater one. She had nearly been consumed by it. They moved the boat slowly downriver, hugging the banks, avoiding the main channels. The journey was quiet, deliberate, both of them aware that every sound could betray them. Isaac's hands worked the oars with practiced precision, muscles tensed and ready for sudden danger. Eleanor had learned to trust his judgment without question. When they reached a secluded bend far from the house, Isaac guided the boat into a shallow cove hidden beneath overhanging trees. They stepped onto the soft, damp earth, and for a moment, the world felt untouched by fear, untouched by the harsh rules that had governed their lives for so long. Eleanor looked around. The forest pressed close, leaves brushing her shoulders, branches forming a protective canopy. It was a place that belonged to no one and everyone at the same time. "Where do we go from here?" she asked, her voice calm now, though beneath it ran the undercurrent of everything that had passed. "We plan," Isaac said simply. "We watch. We wait for the right moment. And we act when it counts. No more running without purpose." She nodded, understanding that this was no longer just about her or the papers. It was about the lives entwined in the plantation's shadow, the enslaved men and women who endured daily oppression, the families whose land and homes were threatened, and the fragile balance of power that governed everyone's actions. For a long moment, they stood in silence, letting the river and forest cradle them. Eleanor realized that the night she had been saved had also changed her, in ways that would be impossible to fully articulate. Fear had been replaced with clarity. Helplessness had been replaced with resolve. "I can't go back," she said finally. "You don't have to," Isaac replied. "Not the same person. Not to the same life." Eleanor breathed in the damp, cool air, letting it fill her lungs. "Then we change what can be changed," she said. "For them. For this land. For ourselves." Isaac offered a small, rare smile. "Yes," he said. "For all of that." They returned to the boat and drifted along the riverbank until the sun rose fully, lighting the world with clarity and warmth. Eleanor looked back toward the distant plantation, white columns gleaming in the morning light, and felt no fear. She felt the weight of responsibility, yes, and the knowledge that life there would never be the same, but also a quiet hope that change was possible. The plantation would continue its routines, its whispers and hierarchies, but the night that Isaac had saved Eleanor had shifted something fundamental. Walls that once kept fear contained now bore witness to courage. Quiet obedience had been replaced with silent determination. And the bonds formed in the darkness, the trust, the understanding, the shared bravery, would ripple forward, subtly but irreversibly, through every corner of the land. As they navigated the river, Eleanor allowed herself to imagine a life not dictated entirely by others, a life where choices could be made with conviction rather than fear. And Isaac, rowing steadily, allowed himself the rare thought that perhaps, for the first time, He had acted not just out of survival, but out of purpose. The morning sun climbed higher, illuminating the path ahead. They had survived the night. They had saved what mattered. And though the plantation behind them would never feel the same again, neither would they. The bond forged in danger, in trust, and in quiet courage had created a future neither had dared hope for, a future that belonged, at least, in part, to them both. The river carried them forward, and with it, a sense of inevitability. That the night's choices, the courage displayed, and the truth held close would continue to echo far beyond the shadows of that house. They had survived, and in surviving, they had changed everything. The plantation, its people, and the world around them would never forget the night the slave man saved the mistress, and in that there was bittersweet permanence that neither fear nor power could undo. The story ended, not with relief or certainty, but with a quiet, enduring reflection. Courage, when paired with conscience, has the power to reshape lives, and sometimes, even an entire world.